Should you include family inside of your farm operation? This is going to be a controversial topic, but we're going to dive into it anyway and talk about this in detail in today's video. So let's get to it. Now, when it comes to including or really deciding whether or not to include your kids inside of your farm operation, it really comes down to why you want them there in the first place. Now, the reason I ask you that is because I have talked to obviously hundreds of family farm operations over the years. We've had hundreds of customers come into Legacy Farmer, and a lot of them are the kids that went back to the operation that are now in their 30s and 40s. And most of the time, they're joining Legacy because they got a world of problems that they're dealing with, and one of them is that they have regret for going back to the operation. Now, the reason I bring this up is because as the business owner, as the parents in this type of situation, you really have to determine why you want your kids to come back to the operation, because there is still this old school mentality that exists inside the ag industry where we want our kids to feel obligated to come back to the family operation. That is how my granddad was. That's how that generation was. It's probably how my dad would have been as well if our family feed yard and farm operation wouldn't have went under, because they were raised in a world where you just went back to the operation. You went back to build and expand upon the family legacy. But also back in those times though, the family farm operation could support kids coming back. In today's world, as you know, most of the time they can't support that, right? We can't have 3 or 4 kids coming back to the operation because now you're taking an operation that supported one family at one time. Now it's all of a sudden supposed to support 3 or 4 more families coming back to the operation. It just doesn't make sense financially. So when it comes to though, deciding whether or not you should have the kids come back to the operation, again, it goes back to what are you having them come back for? If you're having them come back because you want them to feel obligated and like you own them and like it's their responsibility to come back and carry on your legacy, good luck to you, because that's going to be a very tough conversation there to have with your kids in today's environment. And the reality is, again, just with prices and where everything is at and the profitability of these operations, it's going to be really hard for them to build the life that they want for their family and their future. Now, let's say though, that you want them to come back not because you want them to feel obligated, but truly want them to come back to take things over. And when you want them to come back to truly take things over, it means your training for them is going to be completely different. The kids that come back because their parents make them feel obligated, most of the time they're treated like employees, which means they're taught and trained to think like employees, which means they're not going to be qualified long-term to take over the operation. So the opposite of this is if you want your kids to come back, one, because the business can sustain multiple families coming back or one family coming back, whatever that kid is, and you want to train them to take over the business, which means you are going to teach them to not only think like an employee, but to think like a business owner, right? You are going to bring them in to the back end of that business so they can truly see the stress, the anxiety, the finances, the numbers, the level of responsibility that you have to feel as a business owner. If you are willing to do that, and that is the reason you want your son or daughter to come back to the operation because you really want to help them expand and grow as business owners and build those business skill sets that they wouldn't get elsewhere, great, do it. That's what you should be bringing them back for. And in my opinion, that's the only reason you should be bringing them back. But again, we're just stuck in this kind of just interesting space inside of the ag industry where some people are still attached to that old school way of thinking where they make their kids feel obligated and like they owe them something and that they should be coming back because it's their responsibility to carry on the family legacy. And it's just not the case. The today's generation, or at least my generation, we think differently about that. People are looking at expanding, kind of their opportunities and their choices in front of them. And so if you want your kid to come back to the operation, you got to make sure they're coming back for the right reasons and that you're bringing them back for the right reasons, but also too, that you keep your word, right? And you maintain your promises and things that you told them were to happen inside the operation if they did come back, and you help them grow and develop as business owners, as people, and as somebody that can take over and carry on the family legacy for the next generation. Now, the second point here, and we kind of covered this just a little bit though, is there is a massive, massive problem in the industry today with these kids that came back to the operation that are now in their 30s and 40s and 50s that have only been taught and trained to think like employees. And the situation here that we consistently see over and over again is that the kid that's now in their 40s or 50s that came back to the operation has everything fall into his or her lap because the parents maybe passed away, right? And now all this responsibility is just dumped onto essentially a person that's an employee, and they are not going to know what to do. I have seen this time and time again, and it's completely overwhelming to them, and they are going to have years of being able to catch up and really learn and develop the level of skill sets they need as a business owner to take the operation and grow it. If you are in the situation where you just dump these things onto your kid and they've been trained as an employee, you can basically kiss any growth in the operation goodbye for that generation, because it's just not going to happen. These skill sets as a business owner and just building up the mentality that it takes to really bear all the weight and all the responsibility and all the stress that it takes to lead an operation and move it forward, meaning you're growing it, you're taking risks, you have to analyze things, you have to have a strategy in place, you have to be a well-rounded business owner to grow the operation. If you are not preparing your kids in that way, you are setting them up for failure long-term, and that is the big issue that we see today. If you are dumping things back onto your son or daughter who's in their 40s and 50s and they're trained like an employee, the operation just isn't going to grow for that generation. And this is, again, something we've seen time and time again happen with customers coming into legacy farmer or family farm operations that we've just talked to on the phone over the years. So at the end of the day, my friends, one question I can ask myself, or one question I'll answer for you on whether or not I think your kids should come back to the operation, my answer up front is going to be no. And the reason for this is because that old generation, that old mentality still kind of hangs in the balance there, to where we got to make sure we're bringing kids back for the right reason. But as a parent though, the reason I would tell you to not push your kids to come back directly to the farm operation and be solely relying on the operation as their sole source of income is because you can push them to build a business that runs alongside the operation. And what do I mean by that is, if you have a family farm operation, maybe they build some type of custom service business, right? Maybe they build something that runs alongside the family farm operation, because then you are giving them an opportunity and putting them in this environment where they still have to be a business owner, right? They have to start developing those skill sets, and they have to start bearing some of that weight and understanding some of that stress and anxiety that you cannot teach somebody. It has to be experienced in order for you to be able to learn it. And they're gonna have to learn about numbers and finances and marketing. They're gonna have to learn how to present themselves to people. They're gonna have to learn how to build a business. And those kids, the ones that are doing it that way, which I have seen time and time again as well, it's a very few, probably 1% of the industry overall, but those kids that their parents raised them that way, those kids do not need their parents for anything. And those kids are going to be the ones that are most qualified to take over the parents' operation and lead it and grow it and expand and do it strategically and not carelessly, because this kid has had to come back and earn his way or her way to building their business, which means they've had to become a student of the numbers. They've had to figure out operationally what to do on day-to-day management and make these strategic decisions here to build a business and get it to where it's efficient and profitable and can sustain their family and their lifestyle. It's just a different human being that you're raising there. And so again, I'm not saying no, the kids shouldn't come back to the operation. Okay, great, bring them back, but don't let them rely on the family farm operation as the sole source of income. Push them to start something else, and you can even help them out. I'm not saying help them out financially and give them free money, because that just causes a whole world of problems that we're not going to get into in this video, but help them and support them as more of a consultant in their life, right? And don't tell them what to do. Ask them strategic questions that make them think about what they should do, so that they can come up with the answer themselves that maybe you ultimately want them to get to, but it's not your job to tell them what to do. It's your job to ask them strategic questions that help them think and grow and develop as a business owner. If you do this, your son or daughter is just going to be completely different long-term. They're going to be way more successful long-term. I can guarantee you that, just based off the members and the families that I've seen over the years. The ones who did it this way, that next generation, they are going to be so successful, and there's so much of a different family dynamic and relationship between parents and son or parents and daughter that came back, because there's no reliance on each other, right? There's none of those awkward conversations around money and finances and passing over assets and things like that. So this is how you can just truly set those kids up for success and really separate them from what everybody else inside the industry is doing when it comes to kids coming back to the family farm operation. So guys, if you're struggling on how to navigate your kids coming back and really struggling on how to lead them and really build those business-minded skill sets that they are going to need in order to build and grow the family operation and take it over one day, this is something that we deal with inside of Legacy Farmer all the time. And the nice thing about our software, which we call Farmer Metrics, it's really become this type of business in a box software where everything important inside your operation lives in one place, from finances to banking to operationally to core values to culture to your accountability chart. Just the overall inner workings of the operation lives inside of our software. And that's why I call it a business in a box. And so that's what we help people get set up, because when that next generation does come back, now you have a system to give them, right? It's proven, everything's in one place. You can clearly see where everything is at. You know what decisions to make and not to make. You know what your numbers are. Just you know where everything is at in the business, and that's what you'd be able to train them on and teach them on. And this is exactly what we do inside of Legacy Farmer. This is the exact reason we created our software called Farmer Metrics. So my friends, if you want help with that and you want to learn more about Legacy Farmer and Farmer Metrics and what we do, then click the link below, schedule a free call with our team. On that call, we're going to discover more about your operation, your challenges, And ultimately, though, the most important one is the results that you want and where you want to go. And then at the end of it, we're going to see whether or not we're a good fit working together. So click the link below and we'll see you on the call.